Event. I'm here with Kelly, and we're gonna be starting off another part of Business Bites. This installment is going to be on unlocking potential and mastering the art of expanding capabilities within your organization. And I'm super excited to hear everything that Kelly has to say. My name is Jack, and I'm with Hana House. For those of you who don't know, Hana House is a pay-by-the-hour co-working space here in Newport Beach, California. Um, it's a pay-by-the-hour workspace, so it's really great for those of us who have the opportunity to work from home and want to switch it up a little bit. I know so many people are working virtually, and so you might feel like you get stuck at home, or you might just want to break from, staying at your desk every day. So if you ever want to get out in SoCal, I recommend just checking out Haunted House, swing by, get a cup of coffee, get some work done, and just, enjoy the day. All right, Kelly, let's kick it off. I'm super excited to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Jack, and thanks to Hana House, the team at On Its Axis, and everyone who takes the time to join Business Bites either live with us here as we stream on Zoom or the many, many people who follow up with a recording. As always, and it's hard to believe we've been doing this for years now, but as always, we'll record this session. So if you are live and you'd prefer, feel free to keep your profile on private profile. But if you do want to come online, we just ask that you keep your mic muted and use the Q&A box or the chat box to ask any questions you have. We really target making these programs as interactive as possible. If you don't already know me, or you're not familiar with Hana House and On Its Axis, I'm going to spend just a moment talking about our collaboration and why we came together. Because for this topic, I think it's a particularly great example. Before COVID, which feels like another business environment, we were really excited when the Hana House Newport Beach location opened up in Southern California. We were excited because unlike some of the other existing co-working models, this was really driven as a community networking and connection location, and it allowed for drop-in community. And as a firm with a footprint in Southern California and a footprint on the East Coast, where we travel consistently, being able to have an office that we could count on to have meetings and connect, but not having to have a long-term lease or office commitment in that specific location was really exciting to us. Then when we had the chance to drop in and learn a little bit about Hana House and how they were trying to connect with other entrepreneurs in the community to help them connect with one another, to help them in developing their business, we brainstormed on this idea of Business Bites. And On Its Axis is a woman-owned management consulting firm that really has its roots in helping the founder community develop and launch from idea to scaled organizational products. We were really excited about the opportunity of connecting with local community and that localization opportunity. Then COVID happened and this became virtual, which was a blessing in many ways because it gave us the opportunity to connect across the world. Just as On Its Axis started as a product innovation firm and really started as a localized consultancy and has grown to supporting not only that startup and founder community and scale up community, but also the Fortune 500. Today's topic is one that I'm incredibly excited about. I'm excited because there are people who are joining from all over the world. So if you're here with us live, chime in, let us know where you are. If you're on our live stream, feel free to let us know on live stream where you are. And if you're watching this on your own time, maybe after work, thinking about launching a new product or thinking about launching something new, a new line within your existing company, feel free to write us and reach out. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, you can connect with our team on LinkedIn, and you can find us a lot of days of the week at the Newport Beach Haunted House. So feel free to look for us there too. But let us know where you are. We do want to connect with you. The whole point of this is about bringing people together for community. Now, I mentioned that I'm particularly excited about the conversation, and I wanted to talk about it in the concept of capacity building in today's topic. And I'm excited about the topic of capacity building because it's really, when I think about our business and all of the different audiences we serve, the question that comes up most consistently across all audiences, from individuals who are entrepreneurs to individuals who are starting out their entrepreneurial journey, to leaders who've been 20-year veterans with large multi-billion-dollar organizations, this question of capacity building consistently comes up. Nonprofit, for profit, public and private. So, what is capacity building? If you're here live, I'm going to give you a second to think about it for yourself. What inspired you to start this playback or to join us here today and tune in? What do you think capacity building is? I didn't freeze. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to think about it for just a moment. And in today's session, I'll be doing that several times. Capacity building is really an opportunity for us to have a conversation that should be grounded in your thoughts. It should be grounded in the uniqueness of your company. It should be grounded in the uniqueness of your business objectives. And so I want to know, as you're talking live, what it is for you that you are looking to achieve and accomplish. Now, as we think about capacity building, one of my very favorite definitions is actually by the United Nations. Capacity building is the process of developing and strengthening the skills, instincts, abilities, processes, and resources that organizations and communities need to survive, adapt, and thrive in a fast-changing world. This is a really wonderful definition of capacity building because it's an acknowledgement of the instinctual elements that are involved for organizations. It's an acknowledgement of what makes it unique, but it's also an acknowledgement that there are systems that have to be in place for organizations to grow and scale. Now, why capacity build? And for some people, your objections may be grounded in your objectives. I'm going to say that again. For some people, your objections to the idea of capacity building may be grounded in your objectives. Not every intrapreneur or entrepreneur wants to build a venture scale business. Not every individual who's working in a corporation wants to climb the career ladder into management or senior leadership or even changing within their existing careers. And that's okay. Capacity building isn't an endless endeavor for individuals whose objectives are simply to create a safe and secure environment for themselves, a reliable workforce. But even those people whose objectives are narrow in terms of the growth goal or the growth plan or the processes to achieve them should be leveraging their instincts, should be working on their abilities within the skill sets that are in their goals. And this is important because it allows you to adapt to this fast changing world that we're in. So even if your goal is to start as an employee and to stay in that same role until you retire from your organization, you should be aware of what's going on within the business world around you. How competitive is the organization that you've tied your career to? How secure is the role that you're in? How does that look in terms of your income in comparison to the community that you're living in? And will your career allow you to maintain the lifestyle that you want to live in your environment? All of these are elements of capacity building. And so, whether you're a plug and play team member within an org, or you're here because you're a founder thinking about how do I go from 0 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 100,000, and scaling to public market, you should be thinking about the processes and dynamics necessary for your own growth. That's a lot, but hopefully you're with me. And for those of you who don't know who I am personally and why I have the right to be talking about this capacity building topic, let me spend just 2 minutes on who I am. I'm an executive with the team at On Its Axis. And as I mentioned, we're an innovation consulting firm. We do work with organizations small and large. We are headquartered in SoCal and in Philadelphia. But beyond my role at On Its Axis, I've been an entrepreneur. I've been an executive in a Fortune 500 company. I'm a founder of a nonprofit. And our team at On Its Axis has helped countless organizations to grow and scale from a variety of different methods. We've helped them launch and reimagine new products and programs. We've helped them research declining trends on existing products and programs. We've helped them rebalance their organization after a merger or acquisition. All of these are events that are related to capacity building. And so, yes, I have the academic background. I'm an MBA and a CMP, and I have a nonprofit and public policy master's as well. But really, capacity building is also based on instincts. And one of the things that is my personal thrive zone is identifying the interconnection between elements, looking at how products and people and process come together to create results and dynamics. And for me, that's one of the things that's most exciting about the world of capacity building. Now, not everybody thinks like me, and I'm aware of that. So I mentioned that this is one of the most common questions we get at On Its Axis, and one of the most common scenarios that I experience is this idea of capacity building. And it often comes up for entrepreneurs who are thinking about stepping out into entrepreneurship. So I'm thinking about becoming a contractor or consulting, leaving my W-2 job, or early stage startups who are thinking about how do I want to go from my first 5 clients to my first 25 clients. And when we think about capacity building, a really important element of this is tying your growth objectives to the resources you currently have at hand, and then thinking about the roadmap or the path to being able to have the resources you need to support at the same performance level for scale. So let's think about that together. On the screen, I have a hypothetical startup. This startup is coming to us and they're saying, I want to grow and I want to go out. So maybe it's uh, we'll say Jill, and Jill's thinking about launching her first consulting business. She's thinking, I would like to move from my role as a legal, attorney in a practice to running my own legal practice for startups. And I want to go out and I want to get my first client. And the very first thing Jill wants to think about is what makes that client good? What does that first client need to have in order to leave the security of Jill's job in the legal practice? And Jill's going to have to map that out. She's going to have to think about what she needs to make the leap from moonlighting or side hustle, as we call it today, in supporting that first client, to really being able to step out as an entrepreneur into the world of having an independent legal practice. And then once Jill does that, Jill also needs to be thinking through, what does it look like And what's the timeline for me to go from that first client to a second client? And can I support that second client at the same level? Does my performance level with that second client have to be at the same amount? Or what is the path? What is the framework in which I want to think about beginning to scale my practice? And that's how we move from an employee with a side hustle to a consultant or a contractor to beginning to be a startup business owner. And as we think about capacity, maybe Jill adds in another business that she's supporting. And maybe this is different. These are clients. Maybe it's one or two people that she's supporting. Maybe she's got a couple of marketing clients and she's their legal startup. But maybe this is in another field. So she starts to think about resilience in her business. I don't want to just serve marketing startups. I also want to serve fintech startups. Is there a different scope of services that Jill needs to be providing for them? Is there different resources that she needs? And how does she manage her time? If Jill doesn't think this through and she gets a really big business number 4, how does it impact her very first critical client? Does she lose that client? Is she at risk? Does she need to think about hiring? Does she start to have all of her clients start to feel like there's pull on her time? This is capacity building planning. Jill's thinking about how can I support an even bigger client so that I can begin to think about scaling my team. If Jill doesn't do this, if Jill doesn't begin to think about it, Jill can very quickly get overwhelmed and can potentially run the risk of losing her business. So more clients can actually put Jill's practice at risk if Jill doesn't have a really great capacity building program, because overwhelm can start to happen. And Jill herself probably can't serve all of these people. And so this is a really great example of this practice. Now I can use exactly the same example as a big business. So imagine that instead of it being a startup, it's a Fortune 500 company. And they have a reliable core brand product that they have forever been associated with. Let's pretend that they're a major toy manufacturer and their core product is a child's toy, a doll set that many children have known to love and have utilized. In order for them to think about launching other services, they want to think about adjacent products. They want to think about how much can we afford to sell to our existing customers before we start to deplete the return on investment from those customers. Meaning, is there a limit to how much those customers are willing to spend on toys? And how much do we need to think about getting different customers? So the idea of the framework or the process just shifts if you're a bigger company, but the questions are still the same. You have to know what your objectives are. You need to truly understand the customers that you're serving. You need to understand your own core resources, and you need to truly understand what financial, tax, time, talent capacities you need in order to be able to hit those objectives. And then you need to truly understand the competitive landscape to build a reasonable time map. And those are really the key elements when you're thinking about capacity building. So I'll pause for a moment before we dive deeper into this idea of align scale. And I'll just ask on this last question, are there any questions that you have about the idea of a roadmap for capacity building or on the concept of capacity building? I'm just going to also check on stream. Okay, this is a good question on capacity building that I'm just going to come back to. So as we think about this, I mentioned the individual who's contributing, and I mentioned the big company, but how does it apply to the startup company? So how does capacity building apply to the startup founder? So A lot of people have been talking about AI, artificial intelligence, recently, and there are a lot of artificial intelligence companies that are popping up. And if you're a startup, let's say you're an AI startup, and you're thinking about your growth plan, and you're thinking, there are a few factors that you want to think about. You want to think about who's on your team. You want to think about what skill sets does my team have? And what are the costs associated with converting customers to profitability for our business? So you want to think about your current team. You want to think about costs. You want to think about your path to profitability. And then you want to think about what's the competitive landscape. So let's pretend that you're an AI company and you're building an AI solution for, I used a legal example. So this time, let's talk about um, dog vet records. So you want to build an AI solution for pet insurance and pet care. You want to be thinking about, what does it cost to build the model, or how am I building that model? And what are the roles on my team, and what am I going to have to partner with in order to outsource or to be able to achieve the initial customers I need to get traction and validate my business? And then what do I need to, will I need financing? Will I need venture capital to be able to get to the next step? Or is there a path to profitability where I don't need to give away some of the equity in my company? So when you're a startup and you're thinking about capacity building, you're thinking about time, talent, treasure in very specific ways. You're thinking about staying ahead of the competition so that you have a defensible moat. This is something that VCs, venture capitalists, love to talk about. Do you have a defensible moat? So a barrier in your business that helps differentiate your startups from your startup from the other startups in the landscape. And that might be from your team. So your team might be comprised of two of the foremost veterinary experts in a particular market, and a California insurance commissioner might be on your board. And so you might say, hey, I'm really shored up on my talent, but I don't have anybody on my team that has great go-to-market and conversion expertise. And so I know, to be able to get initial traction of initial customers and verify that there's a market opportunity for this, that's an area where I'm going to need some help. And then you need to build a plan around how to gain that capacity in a way that's most cost effective for you to retain your competitive advantage that you gained from your team, and to be able to retain your financial opportunity, right? You don't want to spend $100 million to go out and get those initial customers and only have them bring in 40,000. That's a really good example of the balance for startup. So hopefully that's helpful on the startup example, and thank you for the question. So as we're moving forward, capacity building isn't just something that happens at the beginning. Capacity building should be a continuous cycle within your organization. But whether you're just starting out or you're in a position of being a 100-year-old company, thinking about how to gain additional market share, how to respond to eroding customer margins. So like, if, let's say you're a big business, but you've noticed that the last 3 quarters you've had a dip in sales in a really core business line, and you want to be able to make sure that you stay ahead of the competition by getting that back. You want to think about your capacity building that in a way that aligns to who you are as a company. So let me talk about USP for 1 second, and just a quick check-in. For those of you who are here and those of you who are online, are you familiar with the concept of unique selling point or unique selling proposition? And I'm just going to give it a second to hear. Okay, it looks like most people here are familiar with it. And Great. So it looks like across the board, most people are familiar with it. If you're listening in from home, USP is really just what differentiates you from the other people serving your market. And it is what makes your company competitively different. And usually, that relates to your approach to solving a problem. It relates to perhaps the technology or whatever is in your moat or your team. And so, in the case of Jill, her expertise as an attorney, her connection with her customers, her passion for marketing or her specialization in marketing, that Jill example that I gave earlier, those might be her USP. And so, one of the things that's really important as Jill thinks about scaling her business is to balance the element that differentiates her, that helps her to attract and retain new customers, usually through referral or through competitive case studies or authority sales. That USP is usually based in that expertise. And once you have expertise in something, it differentiates you. You want to balance that against the risk of being too singular in your focus. So if Jill launches her business and focuses on serving marketing startups, and AI changes the needs of marketing startups, Jill's business would be in jeopardy. So, Jill, when thinking about scale, not only needs to consider her expertise, her interests, passions, and objectives, but she also needs to think about the system she's selling in, the environment she's selling in, and she should be thinking about how to align her scale to an adjacent market to help insulate against big market changes. And so, if you've ever watched Business Bites before, you've heard me talk about market change and market opportunity. You've heard me talk about the rapid pace of change in the world. And it's more important than ever right now, as people are thinking about scaling and growing their businesses, to be thinking about how to build in this aligned scale way. Really thinking about how do I build resilience into my business model from day one or from point 100 years in, if you're thinking about this now and you're an established and big business, where do I go from here based on my brand? So let me give the same example. And just as I did last time, we'll talk about that big toy company. So if I'm a big toy company, in my example before, I said there's a threshold in which that toy company, if they just keep selling toys to their existing customer, is going to hit market saturation. No matter how strong a brand they have, at some point, if they're selling in a geography and they're selling to a specific and targeted customer audience, a specific and targeted niche, without building in adjacent resiliency, their customers won't have the capital to continue to invest in new products. So they'll have to take some capital away from the dolls to go to the new toy line. This is because in any business, there's a threshold of market saturation. So when you're building and you're thinking about capacity building, you want to build resistance against market risk, but you also want to be building around market opportunity. And so you want to think about the opportunity of product adjacency. So if you're really well known for toys, is there another way to capture spend from your audience where they're not spending from you, where it's not going to take money out of their doll or their holiday toy budget? And instead, it's going to take money out of perhaps food. So we've seen this a lot in products, and we see it a lot through joint partnerships. So let's say that toy company goes into mac and cheese, and they say, let's put a version of an existing and well-loved brand mac and cheese product. Let's release it with mini versions of our toy, because this strengthens our brand reputation. It keeps our brand in front of our customers, but it's not taking money out of the toy budget. It's coming out of their grocery budget. That's an example of business resiliency and capacity building, utilizing joint partnerships. At the start of the call, I talked about the joint partnership with Hana House and On Its Axis. This is an authority sales partnership. Hana House was building for community and localization, and they created a hub, a place of connection for us to meet up with customers so that we didn't have to create that environment. We knew that if we had people that we wanted to meet with that were thinking about their business, thinking about entrepreneurship, that we could meet with them there and have a safe and exciting environment without us having to build that environment while still strengthening our brand. So we bring customers to Hana House. Hana House gives us the opportunity to reinforce our brand without eroding our time and talent to build out our own co-working or location-specific spaces. And that's an example in that kind of mid-size or private company. Joint partnerships are a really great example of aligned scale that allows you to maintain your brand USP while still thinking about resiliency. That's a lot. So I'm going to pause for a second, and I'm going to check in for questions. Any questions on this concept? Almost forgot to check our live streamers. Are there other kinds besides joint partnership? That's a great question. So yes, there are a lot of different ways that you can think about aligned scale. You see this quite frequently. I gave the example of Jill and the law practice. Occasionally, you'll see a law practice decide to partner with a CFO or an accounting practice. And that's an example of that kind of joint partnership, but you might also see that law practice bring on another partner that's adding to their talent and expertise. And so if they bring on another partner to be able to contribute to the conversation, maybe that partner serves another vertical. So if they've been serving the vertical of marketing firms, just to keep with our example, this partner serves healthcare startups and has expertise around law for healthcare startups. That would be an example of it. But beyond that, it might be an entirely new service line. And so there are many companies, and I bet you can think of some, but there are many companies that start off with a specific brand. They might have been selling books, for example, and thinking about selling books online. And they realize, hey, as we are digitizing, there's a need for us to be able to change from having to do localized software on every desktop. And maybe there's an opportunity in tech and in cloud computing. Let's explore that with some of our revenue. And so let's start to incubate and solve our own problems and then build a business model around that. That's also aligned scale, thinking about your own business problems or the problems of your customers, and then thinking through other solutions. If you're not familiar with that little bookseller that was thinking about other ways of solving their own problems, I'll give you a chance to chime in the end on who they may be. So just keep thinking about that. Any other questions on this idea of scaling through aligned scale and brand USP? Just checking one more time. All right. So as we move on, now, as you're thinking about this, one of the most common problems we see with organizations, and we've heard about it a lot recently, has to do with aligning your talent to your objectives. And many businesses really struggle with organizational development, scaling as it results to capacity building, in building out the right team. And so this comes up in the news when we hear about large group layoffs, when we hear about organizations that release entire divisions of a team. It comes up frequently when we hear about organizations that replace senior leadership positions quickly after receiving funding or launching a new product. Choosing and building the right team players to be able to hit your organizational development goals is an art and a science. It's something that your team really needs to think through. It should begin with organizational structure. And the truth is, the science of this is at different stages within an organization's life cycle, and at different stages within a product or a program's life cycle within that larger organization, there are needs for different organizational structures. A different way of saying that is a Fortune 100 company has very different process, procedure, reporting, documentation, organizational capacity building needs than an organization that we talked about as being an early stage startup, like that AI startup from our example earlier, or even Jill's early step into entrepreneurship as she launches her business. And so, as you're thinking about organizational structure and as you're thinking about capacity building, you have to first think about where is your organization in its life cycle? Where is the specific product or program you're trying to bring to market in its life cycle? What's the culture of the work environment that you're working within? Do you have a very dispersed team or are you highly localized? All of these things matter in terms of capacity building. How much control and how much risk are you in a highly regulated industry? All of these things impact your ability to successfully scale, maintain that moat, and create the resilience in your organization to be able to hit key milestones or objectives over time. So, said differently, organizations need to evolve. Capacity building isn't a linear path. And even successful organizations will transition team. There are people who thrive in small, decentralized, and chaotic, we'll say early stage programs, products, work environments. They love the dynamic environment of solutioning. And there are people who are exceptionally great and thrive in highly structured, disciplined, regimented, and repetitive work environments. Let's go all the way back to that very first example I gave on the first screen. Those people who are entrepreneurs who want to contribute and want consistency in their work. The environment that you choose as that individual, as you're thinking about consistency, as you're thinking about your thrive zone, is really important. So, when we think about organizational structure as leaders and organizational structure for capacity building, it's really important to be honest about what your current state is. If you're in firefighting mode and you're trying to move from your first 10 customers to your first 100 customers, and you have 6 months of organizational runway before your next fundraise, bringing somebody in whose last role was 13 years and not telling them about that environment and the upside and the risk of stepping in can create chaos, even if all other plans of your capacity building program are exceptional. So, that dynamic, the interplay of how do you recruit, how do you think about team, talent, time, how do you think about your org need is critical. We refer to this at On Its Axis as change agility. And change agility is about the dynamic of structuring your team for success based on your next several key milestone objectives. You don't want to think, where do I want to be in 20 years? And only plan for the 20-year roadmap. You also have to think about the success of the next 3 and 6 months to be able to ensure that the 20-year roadmap is possible. Change agility is about balancing. And we talk about this here at On Its Axis by saying that we're a product and people company. And a lot of people question about our name, On Its Axis. What does it mean? Well, we turn things on its side and look at them from different angles. So it's really about the intersection of product, process, and people. And this is capacity building. Capacity building is thinking about what is the competitive advantage of whatever you're trying to bring to market. What is your objective in trying to bring it to market? Are you bringing it to market with a goal of a 3 to 5 year exit? Are you bringing it to market with the goal of making $15,000 a month consistently for the next 10 years? Neither one of those is a preferred business model depending on your objectives and your goals. So if you want to be Jill and you just want to know that you can have 3 to 5 clients consistently over time, you can build a business model that supports that, and you can build for resilience around that, and you can create consistency, and there's not a need to scale. And that's capacity building for Jill's business. But you can also build this for a large international Fortune 100, thinking about, how do I move the needle from owning 42% of the market share to 47% of the market share over the next 5 years? What do I need to do in terms of products being delivered to market? How can I find that balance between new product launch and not eroding the value of my existing business products? And how do I do that without bringing too much change to my internal team to decrease internal team productivity? How do I find that innovation balance? And that's capacity building in a nutshell. So when you're thinking about capacity building, I'm going to come all the way back for those of you who are just joining in, and there's a few on the live call, and there's a few who just joined in here with us on Zoom. When you're thinking about capacity building, coming back to this United Nations definition, it's the process of developing and strengthening the skills, instincts, abilities, processes, and resources that organizations and communities need to survive, adapt, and thrive in a fast-changing world. So when you're thinking about this as a company, we've talked about, how do you survive? How do you make sure, if you're Jill and you leave your job as a partner at a law firm to launch your own practice serving marketing startups, and you're going out, how do you make sure that once you hang up the shingle and say, I'm in business, that you don't have to return back to the job search and go back in-house as a partner in another firm? Then how do you think about how to adapt in the environment as Jill? How do you make sure that you build that resilience as you move, as we think about this, from that first client to your second, to your third, to your fourth? How do you think about building in resilience in who you're serving without eroding the service that you're providing and without overwhelming yourself to lose all of the customers or to burn out? And as we think through this, how do we do this in a way that allows our brand to maintain brand integrity, to maintain its competitive advantage, its brand reliability, its consistency in the marketplace? How do we differentiate from our competition through joint partnership? How do we do this in a way through adjacent product launches or solving and serving in new markets through the adoption of new team? And then how do we bring the right people in at the right time as a team to be able to hit those key organizational objectives? And how do we withstand? How do we survive and adapt as the world shifts, as we move from this world where we're driving in cars and we're going through intersections or around a rotary, or uh, a roundabout, depending on how you call this. I think there's a few other names if you want to chime in. And we believe that this is about thinking about capacity building as thinking about the intersections of product, your people, the time and talent, both internally and who you're serving, and the processes and resources you need to be able to objectively achieve them. So, with all of that said, with our final time that we're here together, let's talk about a few live examples. Are there any examples that you can think of companies that have done this well? Feel free to chime in on chat and just let us know some examples, or if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them into chat. And while that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick look at the live stream. Okay. So as we're looking at the live stream, an example that somebody shared as an example of a company that has done capacity building really well is Amazon. And earlier I made the joke about Amazon moving from being a bookseller to being now a conglomerate across an industry leader across many, 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 many verticals. And I think that's a really great example of capacity building. But capacity building, even in organizations like Amazon, don't come without some product failures. And so this is a great opportunity to talk about the reminder that building for capacity doesn't mean not having change. Building for capacity doesn't mean an organization not having any failures. And on its axis, we talk about um, rapid product development or human-centered design with a focus on failing forward, looking at how do we micro test what might happen in the marketplace? How do we become as agile as possible at listening to market trends and making small tests, very nimble tests, just as we would do as a startup, maybe just as Jill would do. So even with large or enterprise organizations, how do we think about rapidly experimenting to be able to see opportunities for new growth and new market resilience that allows an organization to shift and change? Because even the largest organizations with incredible resources, with seemingly untapped financial opportunity, have product launch failures, have layoffs. We've heard about many of them, make missteps in hiring, or have failures in how they're supporting their internal team, have higher turnover, or what we call employee churn, or have high customer acquisition cost. As we think about this, we want to try to mitigate those things with rapid listening, with really thinking about who are we, what is our unique selling proposition, what are our strengths and our unique resources that allow us to take market, and what are our customers going to be needing in the next 3, 5, 10 years? So not only are we serving them incredibly well today, not only are we, if we have the bandwidth to do so, consistently listening to their needs and how they like our current product and doing product feature development, but how are we thinking about anticipating their future needs and future opportunities? And if you're an employee in the workforce and you're thinking about this, you should be not just thinking about your task, but listening in to the CEO's State of the Union, to the quarterly reports if you're in a public company, listening in to your manager's managers, uh, you know, quarterly review and update calls or key objectives, or maybe the company milestones that are added on an annual basis or biannual basis, and be thinking, do those things align to with what you know the customers you're trying to serve want and need? So even if your goal is just to stay in the same job for 30 years, you should have a personal capacity building program that's thinking about the future and planning for potential failures, because even the best companies will face change and failure as the market consistently shifts. So that's capacity building. I'm going to leave time for live questions. If anybody has any live questions, I'm here for it. Please feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat. If you're on our live stream, I'll take a quick look. Lots of thank yous. If you're listening from home and you have questions, feel free to link in with me. I'm available on LinkedIn, and always love connecting with the network and helping wherever I can. And if you see me at Haunted House, stop by, say hello. And with that, if there are no questions, I'm not seeing any, I will hand it to you, Jack, to close us out today.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly, so much. It was an amazing topic. I think everyone's going to leave with just a bit more knowledge on the subject. And I really appreciate this. We are having another Business Bites next month. Kelly, if you want to introduce that really quickly.
Jack, I was hoping you would.
Oh, okay. Well, next month we are having our final one for the year. So it's going to be navigating the launch pad. And I'm very excited for that one. So please make sure you sign up for either our Haunted House newsletter. We're also going to be posting it on our LinkedIn. So just please check both On Its Axis and Haunted House for updates for that event. And thank you everyone just for attending. And I hope you left with something amazing, just even if it's a little bit.
Thank you all. I appreciate your time.